This is hard to believe. Our ninth year, we're closing in on the decade of our commitment and our work with all of you with leadership. And I have heard among the halls that people are wondering a little bit about that. So I thought I'd like to begin just by giving you a little kind of historical perspective from Wallace's point of view about what we've done over the last 20 years and how we're thinking about what we might do in the future. Heavy emphasis, ladies and gentlemen, on the word thinking. We're still thinking. But you know, we spent the decade of the 90s learning about teaching, what it is, why it's important, how to make it better. And then we spent this decade surrounded by all of you learning and thinking about how to make leadership better. And as we think about where we go in the future, we're going to build on everything we've learned. And we're going to think about how do we now take everything we know about great teaching and great leadership, and how do we figure out ways to actually really get those great leaders and great teachers into the schools that need them most? How do we think differently about time, both time during the school day and time during the summer, when the summer reading loss is so incredibly important? How do we think about all of the resources our community has to offer, both in school and out of school, and bring them to bear so that we can surround children with learning and enrichment opportunities from sunrise to sunset? Those are the places where we think we are headed. I hope that we are headed there with many of you. But as we stand here today and think about the future, it really does feel to me like we are at an incredibly important moment in history, in time. I know it's a cliche, but I don't know about you, but I really feel it. We may very well be at an inflection point as a country. We have a federal administration, as you heard last night, that has demonstrated a firm commitment, backed up for the first time ever with serious resources, to the work we all really care about, improving the educational opportunities for all of our children. Across the country, state and city and district leaders are rethinking their roles and working with each other in more strategic and cohesive ways. And while we may not, actually, we never agree on every issue or on how best to proceed on any particular aspect of reform, there is broad consensus that reform is urgent and absolutely necessary. Albert Einstein reminds us that we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And so we need all of the creative ideas we can muster across all of the boundaries with which we work in order to create systems that are worthy of all of our children. And it feels to me like there's an opportune moment here, if we put our minds to it, to do it. For the past decade, as I know many of you know, the issue we have been working on together is leadership. And 10 years ago, I'm not embarrassed to say, most people thought it was a harebrained idea. It was not what anyone would have called a hot issue. It was noticeably absent from most major school reform efforts for the past 20 years. It was not on most policy agendas. And in fact, most people we talked to thought it shouldn't be on most policy agendas, that it would be a distraction, that it didn't really matter. And even where leadership was recognized as important, there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty about exactly why and how leadership mattered, what could be done to improve it anyway, and whether and how states and districts and schools could work together on figuring out new ways to recruit and select and prepare and retain leadership. None of that was on anybody's radar screen. So quite frankly, as many of you know who were there with us at the beginning, when we began, we were long on questions, short on answers, and frankly, weren't quite sure how to proceed. But fortunately, we were able to gather together a lot of smart folks, many of you in this room, to think and to take risks and to work hard with us And through your wisdom and hard work together, we have found answers to many of the questions and challenges we set before ourselves many years ago. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for hanging in there with us, for teaching us, and for making the progress that we've made. So what exactly is that progress, and what have we accomplished, and most importantly, what have we learned? To begin with, I think it's really clear, and I'm really happy to say, leadership is now on the agenda. It's increasingly accepted at both federal and state levels that school improvement simply cannot succeed without effective school leadership. In fact, we counted, the word principles appears 24 times in the Federal Register. It's important. And one of the federal priorities is ensuring great teachers and great leaders. 10 years ago, the "and" great leaders would never have been there. So seeing the importance of leaders and teachers connected and the interdependence between the two really represents enormous progress. State leaders also recognize the importance of leadership. I know many of you will tell me that you were there way before the feds ever got there, and I would probably agree. But a recent survey confirmed that, a recent survey by the Council of Chief State School Officers and the National Association of State Boards of Education found that most state superintendents and board presidents now believe that school principals have important effects on student learning, and a majority say that the training and the support of school principals is on their state's education improvement agenda. And quite frankly, when the Secretary of Education stood here last night and said that the federal government had underinvested in school leadership issues and he was going to work to fix that, I thought, hallelujah. So it seems no doubt that leadership is higher on the policy agenda, and that's a tribute to all of your hard work. But you know, it's one thing to be on an agenda, and it's another thing to know what to do about it. And that's exactly the subject of this conference. I want to briefly highlight 4 lessons that we think we've learned, that you have taught us, that point the way to improve leadership. First, I'm going to briefly talk about the state district system, the role of the district, the role of the principal, and 4th, what we know about better principal training. You'll hear more about these 4 topics today. If you've looked at your conference agenda, you know the breakout sessions are all around these issues, and I hope you get to many of them. And there's lots more that you can read in your conference materials. So let me give you a quick preview. First, building a cohesive system of education policy from states to districts to schools actually has important payoffs. Rand's confirmed it. And while this sounds logical, such coordination has not historically been the norm. There's often tension, I don't need to tell all of you in this room, there's often tension between state and district leaders. And several years into this work, I was talking to a school superintendent of a major district in the country, and I kind of asked him, you know, what could the state do that would really help you? And the answer was, stay out of my way. And, you know, equal opportunity questioner, I then was talking to a state chief and asked the same question, and I got the response, just follow the rules. So we know that there's tension and we don't always see eye to eye at our different levels. But RAND research that's going to be shared with you today actually tells a surprisingly different and positive story. It finds that if we can truly, at the state and district level, align our policies, school principals, the actors in our play, report greater job satisfaction, relatively strong authority over hiring teachers, which is critically important to them, and the ability to devote more of their time to improving instruction. Second, district leadership is incredibly important, especially in turning around low-performing schools. I know that you know this. Only district leaders can direct additional funds and staffing to the highest need schools and create incentives to help attract and retain those staff. Only district leaders can reorganize the central office to better support principals in their learning improvement agenda. Only district leaders can provide reliable assessments of principals to help them focus on what matters most. And they can free up time for those principals to focus on instruction. For example, an evaluation of a program that began in Kentucky that's now being tried in 9 states found that on average, principals with school administrative managers, known affectionately to many of us as SAMs, are spending nearly 5 hours more a week on instruction. Third, at the school level, research we've commissioned, and as you saw in the film last night, there are virtually no documented instances of troubled schools being turned around without a powerful leader. One of the things someone said to me last night that wasn't on the film is that when Carrie left Harvard Park the following year, their scores dropped by something like 35%. Leadership matters. One reason is that a good principal is the single most important determinant of whether a school can attract and retain high-quality teachers. And the principal is uniquely positioned to ensure that excellent teaching spreads beyond isolated classrooms in the building. To us, the bottom line seems to be that investments in good principals are a particularly cost-effective way to improve teaching and leading. Finally, we've learned a lot about how to do a better job of training principals in the first place. And when we do a better job of training them, they actually do better in their schools. A 2007 Stanford study we commissioned identified the characteristics of exemplary training programs, and I know that many of you have been working with those criteria. Great. And earlier this year, an evaluation of the New York City Leadership Academy, which incorporates those criteria, demonstrated how high-quality training can really pay off. The evaluation found that the academy graduates who were placed in extremely low-performing schools improved their school's academic performance at higher rates than other principals in English language arts and at comparable rates in math, even though they were coming into schools that had a much steeper rate of decline. So if we do a better job preparing our principals, they'll do a better job for us in leading student improvement. States and universities, and even school districts who can use their consumer purchasing power when they hire, can help make these characteristics of effective programs the rule rather than the exception. In fact, in the 16 states that Wallace works most closely, more than 200 university-based leadership preparation programs have either been forced to improve or have shut down. And we know that 24 of the programs that you have created, either in district-university partnerships or district-run, 24 of the programs that you've created have now been ranked as high-quality programs. So these 4 lessons about the state district role, the state district system, the role that a district can play in making sure schools really work, the incredibly powerful and important role principals can play, and what we can do at the university and outside level to prepare people better, point a clear roadmap for action steps that states and districts and policymakers and practitioners can take to spread these more effective practices that we have all now developed working together for so long. And we hope that this conference helps you take steps in that direction. You know, I began by noting that this was a moment of opportunity for improving public education in this country. And leadership is an important component of that effort, but it's not the only component. So I just want to add a few words about the broader implications of the opportunities I think we have before us. While it's critically important to create better schools, we know that learning doesn't begin and end at the classroom door, and that children spend the majority of their time actually outside school. For many, particularly those in the most distressed schools and neighborhoods, there are very few options after the last bell rings. But a number of cities, including Boston, Chicago, New York, Providence, Washington, D.C., are finding new and innovative ways to connect schools with other community organizations to create more high-quality out-of-school time options for children. And there are also very few opportunities for children from poorer neighborhoods to participate in enriching learning programs during the summer months. Not remediation, but the kind of learning programs that we send our kids to. And we know that the summer is a time of tremendous learning loss and loss of opportunity, creating differences in academic track, staying on academic track that persist for generations. This is a problem we've actually known about for 100 years. The first research came out in 1906, and we have yet to find ways to scale appropriate solutions to it. Because education is receiving such prominent national attention now, we have an important opportunity to think differently about how our schools are structured, about how they can better connect with other community institutions, about how we can better surround children with learning and enrichment opportunities both during the traditional school day and during the year. 10 years ago, few people were thinking about leadership. And just look at the progress that we have made together. If we seize the opportunity we have today, perhaps 10 years from today, we'll think about the education system as incorporating not only schools, but also the many other resources that our communities have to offer our children. Secretary Duncan last night and many leaders have talked about education as being the civil rights issue of our time. And in that spirit, I want to leave you with the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, who said that although social change cannot come overnight, we must always work as though it were a possibility in the morning. So let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.